And now, yeah, just like Cabana said, the next keynote is really special, not just because of the topic, but because of the people who are presenting. Abit and Patrick did a tour of 46 different cities all around the country, doing Hex workshops that they provided for free, and that really grew the community and solidified the community in a really special way. So they're really good at presenting and all around being amazing Hexicans. And of course, Crispy Man does a stream with me every Tuesday night and created hexfire.io. And so they've teamed up this year to do the third installment of Abit and Patrick's original Power of T shares that was the keynote at the first Hex conference on the first night. And so with that being said, I would like to introduce this amazing panel.
That's a Hex flex, making money, yeah, we growing by the excess. Yeah, Hex, all we know about is excess. Turn a fiat on ramp to an express.
Thank you so much, Maddie, all in for having us. He already introduced us so well, so there's not too much to say for me. Besides that, here is also the Hex Lion and Crispy, and this is the reason why we have this amazing presentation today, The Power of T-Share, a scientific approach to financial freedom. This is a shout out to all the Hexicans to like and share this right now, because I think we will present a lot of information that is really new and that you maybe have not heard in the past. So let's bring up the screen share and then we will start our show. Here you see our first slide here, The Power of T-Share, a scientific approach to financial freedom, and the KSB TV logo, because this is what we are, Kryptosparbuch, a German community that then rebranded into KSB TV, and you see also hexfire.io, because this time, like Maddie said, we partnered with Crispy to get the best data available in Hex, because this is what hexfire.io is, a really useful tool for us Hexicans to utilize. Is there anything that I should mention for the introduction?
Yes, so also hello from my side, and like the last point you mentioned, so thanks to Crispy Man, now this time it is possible for us that we can really show not only assumptions of how the system will work out in the future, now we can also show that with math calculations in the background, and we will show you some awesome charts in the following section.
So Crispy is really the reason why we are calling this a scientific approach to financial freedom. I'm really liking the title here. But first I want to talk about why we are so excited to share these informations with you. It is an honor to be here today to present the Power of T-Shares at MATIC All-In's online conference. KSB TV has been part of the Hex community since the beginning, and our mission has always been to help people to become their own bank. In the past, we organized 42 free workshops across America to educate the people about the fundamentals of Hex. We've also organized the golf tournament Pulse Masters and the Hex Birthday Party 2022. Our next big event is the Hex Cruise, which will be taking place in April 2023. This is the third year we are presenting at MATIC All-In's Hex online conference, and we are excited to share with you the results of our scientific approach to financial freedom. In the previous years, we had to make assumptions in order to come to the conclusions that we are presenting today, which, by the way, all came true. Back then, we said the T-share pool would rise short term, but then go down long term. And this is really what we are showing here today. However, this year, we are partnered with Crispy, the founder of hexfire.io, to access the best available data on Hex. And with this data, we are able to establish a ceiling and a floor to narrow down our assumptions, making this a more accurate and analysis of the power of T-shares. So first, it's going to be a little introduction. It's going to be like 7 to 10 minutes, me introducing what is Hex, and only then we will dive deeper into where does the yield come from and how much can you earn. In this segment, then we show all our research with the data and the proof why this is a scientific approach to financial freedom. And after this presentation, then you will be able to make your own staking strategy that fits your personal lifestyle. Here, it's really important to say that it's really an individual decision to make, because we want to show you today that really code is law in Hex, and you have to understand all the mechanics of the T-shares, for example, of the daily payout. And these are all the things that we will show you right now. But you also want to stay until the end, because we are presenting you some numbers that Richard Hart is so proud of, but he has not the time to calculate them. And this is why we are here. We have the time, and we are presenting those numbers to you. In the last segment for advanced users, we are talking about the concept of APY and where the 38% number is coming from that you see so often on stickers and all the Hex advertisement. And then in the second segment, we're talking about the average staking duration. And this is Richard Hart's most favorite metric in Hex, because it's always going up so far, right? It started with 4.5 years, and I'm really excited to share with you what is the metric for 2022 right now. And then at the end, we are going into the minted user yield, something that you maybe hear here for the first time like this, that we are talking about the minted user yield. This is really something special. We already talked about that number 2021, and this time it's probably gonna surprise you a lot again. And finally, we will then conclude our presentation with a summary of key takeaways that we got out of this presentation. If there's nothing else, Patrick, or Crispy, that you would add, then I would just go on.
Let's go.
Let's go on.
I want to congratulate the founder of Hex, Richard Hart, for 1,132 days of 100% uptime and flawless operation. I think that has to be said, because we all believe that Hex is a Nobel Prize worthy instrument. And I want to show you just my take of what is Hex. Hex is similar to a certificate of deposit, where you earn yield by locking up your funds for a fixed period of time. It is a perfect design financial product that has been operating flawlessly for over 3 years. To learn more, visit hex.com, because there you will also see Hex is a cryptocurrency that went up 10,000x in price appreciation and is like a safe within a safe. There you will also see the security updates, security audits that we are not talking about today, because this here today is about the power of T-shares. And we want to talk about how is the yield distributed and how is everything without admin keys and immutable. So let's go on.
I would like to add something here, because one important thing to understand for everybody who comes new to Hex is that in Hex, it is just you and the code. There is no company behind it. There is nobody who you need to ask or something like that. You get your Hex in your own wallet, which only you have the private key for, and then it's only you and the code. If no user never would have interacted with the Hex code, we wouldn't have this presentation now, because then there would not be any T-shares created. And the same is after somebody fulfilled his statement of a stake, then only this user himself can come back, interact with the code again, and run the end stake function, which gives him back the principal and all the accrued yield.
That's really good that you mentioned that here, Patrick, because this is something that we will dive deeper into when we are talking about the T-share, and to really find out when does the T-share price go up, for example. But first, I want to talk a little bit more about the where does the yield come from? We will have to talk about what is yield, what is the problem of earning yield the conventional way, for example, and then we will dive into the staking rules, because this is all Hex is. It is code, which is like rules to us, the user. And then in the last part, this is where our calculations start, where we show you how to calculate the daily payout, how to calculate how much Hex is earning your T-share, for example. And this is where we really bring in the research and all the data of hexfire.io. So first, I want to introduce here what is the problem of earning yield the conventional way when you're going to the bank, for example. But here you see the first problem is we have the counterparty risk, the risk of bankruptcy from this third party, for example. Another problem could be that the possibility of interest rate changes, right? And the fact right now, the certificate of deposit at the bank pays so little interest that it cannot compete with the inflation that we are seeing today. Last year, more money has been printed than we can have ever seen in human history. And how does Hex fixes this? Well, Hex is an immutable code that nobody can turn off, so there is no risk of a bankruptcy. And also there are no admin keys, so not even the founder himself could change anything on those rules that we will explain now in the next couple of slides. And like I said before, HEX did 10,000x and pays high interest, high yield, and this is why it can compete so well with those old traditional banks, for example, that give you the certificate of deposit. And I also want to introduce the idea of the biggest problem that we have in crypto, that nobody is holding their own keys. Nobody wants to hold custody of their own coins. And this is what HEX really does to the users. It makes you accountable. It makes you hold HEX in your own wallet. And I think this is a really, really big problem that we have in crypto right now, with all those exchanges going down left and right, for example.
Yeah, that was like a multi-billion-dollar problem this year the last year of 2022.
And then when HEX came out, 2019, Richard Hart really introduced a new philosophy of crypto. How can a crypto be printed out of thin air and then be distributed to the stakers, to the holders that believe the most in it? And that's what you see here at this slide. HEX contract inflates by 3.69% every year, and then this programmable money is programmed to go to the staker class. And the staker class is everybody who makes HEX Stakes and locks up their fund for a certain period of time, which then will give them a T-share. And today, obviously, you know it already, you will learn everything about that. But before we talk about the T-shares and how everything is calculated, I already mentioned it before, the code is law, and that's why I really want to emphasize on the staking rules here, because we have the longer pays better, the bigger pays better, the T-share rate that only goes up, and the early end stake penalties. And you maybe think it's a lot right now, but I want to dive into an example right away, and then you will understand how these tools are given to you to decide yourself how much financial freedom do you want to have in the future. So the first thing that you have to decide on when you make a HEX stake is how much HEX do you want to stake? And you see that here with the yellow arrow, it will give you, if you stake 10,000 HEX, and bigger pays better bonus of 0.06. Well, you see the amount of HEX that you stake is determined the bigger pays better bonus. And the second thing that you then have to have in mind is how long do you want to commit your HEX for a certain period of time that you choose. And I went for a 5555 stake here for test purposes. And you see that gives you the longer pays better bonus of 20,000 HEX. And those together then you see down here is 1.17 T-shares. And now obviously we want to talk about how valuable this T-share is. How much HEX does this T-share earn you? And this is exactly what we go into. But first, obviously, we have to look into the longer pays better bonus, because this is then determining how many bonus T-shares you get. The longer you lock up your HEX, the more bonus T-shares you will receive. The maximum bonus is earned at 10 years lockup period, and the maximum staking length that you can do is 5,555 days. In this little graph here, you see that if you stake for 10 or 15 years, then you will have maxed out your longer pays better bonus, which is then 200% bonus T-shares for your stake. Patrick, did I forget anything on this slide here?
Yes, it's just like a slight arrow. So it's like not 200% bonus T-shares on your HEX. It's like 200% bonus, and then those effective HEX will be divided by the current T-share rate.
Effective HEX definitely is something that we should look into it in the future, but it's not part of this this presentation here. Let's go on. Maybe what we can also mention is, if you look here at this 10,000 HEX and the 5555 stake, the longer pays better bonus, the T-shares, is way more significant here at the longer pays better compared to the bigger pays better. It's just nice for me that a small staker that has not that much HEX can still take benefit of the code by just staking out longer than other people in the ecosystem, for example. Just a little side note here. And then here you see the bigger pays better bonus. The more HEX you lock up, the more bonus T-shares you will receive. And here the maximum bonus is kept at 150 million HEX. And all of this is an incentive to be blockchain efficient. And now we have to go into the third variable that determines how many T-shares you can get. It is the T-share rate that only goes up. This is simulating compounding interest, really important in the HEX ecosystem. It's incentive to stake early, big and long. And here, as of today, you see the current exchange rate for one T-share is 25,460 and is only going up. And Patrick was already saying that the smart contract does only do things once the user interact with it, once the user pays a fee to make a transaction. And now we can ask ourselves, when does the T-share rate go up? This is really crucial to understand. And for this, we have made this sentence here that we have perfected on the 5555 tour. So if a stake is due, the smart contract will determine if the staker can earn more T-shares by restaking the principal plus interest for the same duration as the previous stake. If this is possible, the smart contract will raise the T-share rate to a point where this is not possible anymore. And we can look a little bit closer into the T-share rate here, and you see it is gradually going up every single day a little bit, but sometimes we have those spikes and they represent somebody and staking, for example, and then the T-share rate would have to move up. Otherwise, this person could get more T-shares than it had before. For me, this is really one of the reasons why we Hexicans believe this is a Nobel Prize-worthy financial instrument.
Exactly. And what we need to add here is that sorry, I lost my point. What I wanted to add here is that why we have this function. Yeah, why do we have the T-share rate, the ever rising T-share rate? And the reason we have that is that nobody can cheat the system, because otherwise, without the T-share rate, people could just compound their hex, meaning like staking for a month and then like take their principal and the earned yield and stake it for another month and increase like their power of the yield in the system. And that this cheating, that this slowly compounding is not possible. We have this concept of the T-share rate, and how ineffective this compounding is, we will show in the last segment of the presentation as well.
Because those two first rules that we have, longer pays better and bigger pays better, those two rules have to be always true, and the T-share rate does exactly that. And because we have all those stakes right now and we can see them on the blockchain, it's really transparent, we can already derive a T-share rate forecast. This is also something that you will find on hexfire.io. Crispy, is there something interesting to say about this chart as well, since it is your forecast on your page?
Yeah, sure. You know, in the future, well, a few slides later, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but the combination of the T-share rate increase and also the fact that we are limited in how long we can stake, both of those end up being a feature that helps move people out of the system. And so you either have to continue to stake at the higher rates, otherwise you move out. And that's good news for new people, right? Because that ever increasing cost means that not only in terms of HEX, not only do you have to pay that, but anybody who's restaking has to pay that. And so at the time that they restake, it kind of evens the playing field, and we like to say meat on the bone.
Exactly. So let's go on with the next slide here, which is the fourth rule that we have in HEX, early and late end stake penalties. It's really something, we Hexicans call it the truth engine. And this is an incentive to end stake on terms. And this is really a big innovation, because now we have a financial instrument that makes us users behave in a certain way. And this is all crambled up into the game mechanics of HEX. HEX was designed to do 10,000x, and it did exactly that. And I think the game mechanics of HEX are exactly the reason why that happened in the past. So the truth engine is like a judge. It decides for each and every single person that emergency end stakes too early or too late, what kind of penalty it gets. And it does that in a really elegant way. If you have to pay a low fee if your lie is really small, and you have to pay a high fee if your lie is really big. And we can go into this chart here to look at the fee structure. It looks maybe a little bit complicated right now, but it is pretty easy to understand. Like I said before, if your lie is not that detrimental, if you staked for maybe 1 year and after half of this time you end stake, the fee's not going to be that bad. But if you stake for a long time and then after 1 year or 1 week you want to end your stake already, then the penalty will be severe, which then makes you hold on to your stake, which is a really great feature. Well, and now this is the last part where we really checked all the facts. Now we will go into the daily payout calculation. This is now where we really show the research that we have done. Patrick, you want to take over?
Yes, of course. So thanks for this introduction, AAVE. So now everybody out there knows, okay, what are the general rules of creating a hex stake. And now let's break that down for the system at first. So to check what is the daily payout calculation of the whole system, and then break it down. What does that mean for you as an individual staker, and what does the term mean payout per T-share? And then in the last segment, we also have a staking calculation. And in the daily payout calculation, we will also show you a forward-looking statement based on our charts, based on the assumptions we have there. So next slide, please. So at first, for the daily payout calculation, we have two baskets. The first basket is the daily payout total in the form of hex, and the second basket is the T-share pool total. So the first basket is generated by the code itself, and this second basket is generated by the community. Because what is the sum of all the T-shares? It's the T-share pool. And what is in there? In there are all the open stakes, all the hundreds of thousands of individuals who in the past created a hex stake. And now the daily payout calculation. Let's see what the hex smart contract is doing on a daily base. Always when the timer hits 0 UTC, that's like the time of the payout. We know that hex has an base inflation, like a code inflation of 3.69% as a max. And in the daily payout total, we have the early and late end stake penalties included as well. So what you can see down there is the actual formula, which is a fraction of the 3.69%, the 364th fraction, times all ever minted hex. All ever minted hex is the circulating supply plus the staked principal supply combined. And after that base calculation, the code adds 50% of all the early and late end stake penalties of the last 24 hours. And this is the amount of the daily payout total. And on the next slide, we will see how that looks as a chart. And first of all, let's look at the trend line, the red trend line in this chart there. We see that this is slowly but steadily going up. Why is that? That is because as the amount all ever minted hex is only increasing, and the percentage we are multiplying with it is just the same. That means that the base of the daily payout total is slightly increasing over time. And as we see on the left side, in the beginning of 2021, we were like at 63 million of the base layer. And now 2 years later, we are over 64 million hex as this base. And what you can see here in this chart are all those spikes. All those spikes are days where we have more early and late end stake penalties than usually.
And Crispy, here I want to ask you, the early and late end stake penalties, how severe are they for the system?
Well, I don't know how to answer how severe they are, but they, obviously we can see like on a daily basis, right? What the payouts might be throughout the day, and you'll see that maybe we're 626 right at the moment. But as soon as we see 1 million or more maybe penalties, that goes as high as 6.3 or higher. So it has a very direct effect. And I think that over time it's pretty substantial. But I think we've also seen that penalties, and this is something I don't think we feel this we look at the information, you see all this stuff every day, but penalties have actually been less in 22 than in 21. And it was less than 21 than 20. So it's kind of surprising, but it still affects the systems, you know.
So maybe the user starts to learn more and more that they should not emerge the unstake. This is, I think, a really good indicator here. The reason why I asked that is because in the next couple of slides, when we will talk about the daily payout, how it's calculated, we can never make assumption on how many early or late penalties will occur. So this is totally out of our presentation because this just nobody knows. We can only look at the really hard facts, the hard data that we have available to then derive forward-looking statements from that. So let's continue with our presentation here.
Yeah, that's a perfect comment. Yeah.
Yeah, and now let's look at our second basket, the T-share pool total. The T-share pool total is the total number of shares in existence. And here, guys, actually, let me explain a little bit the T before the word share. The T is only a mathematical expression and represents the term trillion. So you will always and forever find shares in the HEX system if you take your HEX and stake it. It might be that over the course of 5 years, 10 years, or more years, you will have a really hard time to accumulate a whole T-share. But then you will just get a fraction of a T-share. And how to get those T-shares, as already explained, you get them when you create a stake and when you run the end stake function after your commitment, for example, then those T-shares are effectively burned out of the system. As a reward, you get your principal and all the accrued yield in HEX back. And that's why the T-share pool as a total has a deflationary character. Why? Because we have this ever rising share rate where AAVE already explained you how that's determining like when does the T-share rate rise. And we already saw like the chart of the last 2 years, how it already rose from little over 16,000 HEX per one T-share to now over 25,000 HEX per T-share. And on the next slide, we will see this deflationary character when we look at the T-share pool of the last 2 years. So at first, in the year 2021, in the first half of 2021, we saw that we still could increase the total amount of T-shares because much more people joined the system, got their HEX and staked them out, or stakers who came out of a stake, for example, they just choose to stake everything out for longer and increase their T-shares as well. That's why we also saw an increase on the weighted average staking lengths. But then over the course of 2021, people already didn't got like that much HEX anymore or to stake it out. So the T-share pool reached its more or less highest point, and from there we see the deflationary character because we see like a downwards trend, but then we also see from time to time those spikes to the upwards. That is when a big player or a lot of players are staking HEX on a specific day and then generating more T-shares on this day than from other people running the end stake function are getting burned. And that's why the T-share total pool can rise on a daily base. But in the big picture, in the long run, it has a deflationary character. And we see that we went in the last 2 years from a top of over 11 million T-shares to now on the 31st of December, like a week ago, to little over 10 million T-shares.
So the T-share pool, really important to understand how the yield is paid out to all the T-shares and how all of this will work in the future. We will now make simulations and predictions, forecasts for the future when it comes to the daily payout and the T-share pool. So let's go on.
Yeah, so now let's first put the actual picture, the right now situation into perspective. Right now, our first basket, the daily payout total, is about 65 million hex. And this 65 million hex gets paid to all the holders of shares, which we have 10 million point 33 in the total pool right now, and that's how we derive this right now 6.3 hex per T-share number. And this hex per T-share number is also over the course of the future slightly going up. And how that's achieved, we will show you in the next couple of slides. First of all, an easy way to calculate your hex rewards, and actually also a way to calculate kind of your minimum hex rewards, because as the longer your staking duration is, the less accurate this kind of calculation will be, because this calculation is that you just take your T shares, which you can see there in blue in that example, the 1.17, you times it by the average payout per T share, and that would be your amount of hex per day. And this amount of hex per day, you just multiply times your days you will serve, and this gives you your hex reward as an like more or less a easy calculation, because as time goes on, this number of 6.3 will go up more and more. So the longer a stake is, the less accurate this number will be. But this will always and absolutely be like a minimum what you can expect out of a certain stake.
So I must say, I use this calculation a lot for like all my stakes that are 1, 2, 3, 4 years, and even 5 years. And then it becomes more and more like less accurate once we use it for longer stakes, right?
That's true, yeah, because if you made like this calculation 2 years ago, you didn't put it 6.3 hex in there, you put like 5.4 hex in there.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually a really good point that you are making, because we want to calculate how much could be the daily payout in the future and how valuable is your T-share in the future if you hold on to it, right? So, Patrick?
Exactly. So here, another times like the reminder of the daily payout, what we saw in the last 2 years, and now on the next slide, we are putting it into perspective with our daily payout forecast. And here you see like the beginning of the year 2021 until for the next 15 years. And here you see how the daily payout forecast will like slightly increase over time as well. And then like in 15 years, as we will have a way higher total supply of hex that we have now, the daily payout in the millions of hex will not be around 65 million anymore. It will already be over 85 million.
And that's really important for the future, because then we have this slide here as well.
Exactly, because remember, those millions of hex will always go to the total of T shares. Here again, as a reminder, the last 2 years, which happened with the T shares, and now in the next slide, we are not the next one. Where?
I think we have the maximum of T-shares first.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So go back once again, because so here the last 2 years into perspective, where we are now at the 10.33 million, and now on the next slide we show you something interesting. It's like based on the calculations of Crispy here from hexfire.io. It's the theoretical maximum T shares, and this is derived by calculating uh, by calculating what if all the hex in existence would be staked now. So like if the current circulating supply would be staked as well. And that's where you see that this chart starts nearly at 120 million T shares, and as of right now the ceiling would be still about 80 million. But as time goes on, if you just look at mark of 2034, 2035, then you see that it's already less than 30 million, this theoretical maximum T-shares. And then like after 2035, numbers are becoming like a little less predictable, because the reason for that is we don't have a lot of history yet. You know, there aren't so much stakes made yet, like to that point and so on. That's why it looks like a little flat down there. That might change when we have more and more data in the future. And now the next slide. This slide would be with our assumption. And the assumption that we took there was a really, really conservative assumption. It assumes that a lot of hacks which are coming out from stakes is going to be restaked as well. And if we assume like this high restaking rate of between 80 and 90% of restaking, then we will still see a T-share pool which is slowly going down, and after the year 2030 increasing its downtrend.
Hmm.
So, Patrick, I see here one
velocity.
question. Why is the T-share rate, the T-shares declining? And maybe you can answer that really quick here for the people in the chat.
Yes, of course. So in general, the T-share pool is declining because it gets harder and harder in hex terms to obtain a T-share. So for example, 2 years ago, I needed 16,000 hex in order to create one T-share for one stake day. And right now I already need more than 25,000 hex in order to create a T-share for one day.
And now in the next slide here, now you really see the ceiling and the floor, right, Patrick? Tell us a little bit more about this chart.
Yeah, so let's start with the dark blue line, with the floor line. This is the line how the T-share pool would look like if all the stakes who are coming out would not be restaked at all. And then we have the orange line where we put it in our assumption with a really high restaking rate, and then the blue line on top. There we have the theoretical maximum T-shares. And how it will look like exactly in the future, the future can only tell, because we have a dynamic system here. And my personal guess here is that we will see a total T-share pool somewhat between the dark blue line and the orange line.
And then it's really interesting for us to calculate, well, what can we earn in the next 15 years? And here we have the daily payout that is only going up and the T-share pool that is only going down. Patrick, what does that result in?
Yes, exactly. So in, for example, 15 year, there's 85 million hex as the daily payout total is a pretty accurate number. So that won't change much. It would only change by a few millions with early and late end stake penalties. And then on the other side, the forecasted total T-share pool with our assumption of a really, really high restaking rate would be still 9 million T-shares in 15 years from now. And just imagine if we don't get 80 or 90% of all the hex restaked, if we only get like 40 to 50% of the hex restaked, then our calculation here in 15 years would not be the 9.4 hex, it would already be like 20 hex per day.
And you remember this calculation? We did something similar before where we calculated what is the hex that you earn per T-share today. And here we have the number that could maybe play out in 15 years, which is 9.4. And Crispy, I want to ask you, what would you say to somebody who's saying, well, look, from 6 to 9, that's not really a high increase in the next 15 years. How would you counter this argument?
Well, I think it would represent like a 50% increase over what it is today. Well, actually a triple almost, right? No, 50%.
50% is right.
50% is probably rough. And so, I mean, that's a significant increase in yield. But again, I would just say this is we've we've used some pretty conservative numbers in what we're looking at, both on in terms of basically looking at current adoption rates and as well as current restaking rates to come up with the information. So it's the best we have because we now have 3 years of data to kind of look at and try to draw some conclusions. So I would say that that's not very small at all. Now, I am aware, and I think others are aware too, of some estimates that go much higher, you know, but it really comes down to what Patrick was saying about the T-shares. Staker habits, staker activity will determine how many T-shares are in existence. And so if we end up with more T-shares, maybe it's a little bit lower, and if we end up with less, it might be a lot higher. But again, I think in terms of you know, total or user minted hex, it only comes into creation one way. So we only have so much hex that comes out, and maybe people that hold liquid will start learning to stake. I don't know. We'll see.
They will
But
certainly.
yeah.
They will certainly learn this after the next segment of our presentation here. Crispy, this is your part where we have a staking simulation. And I think this shows really, really well how much APY you can earn in Hex when you are staked.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. And I, you know, this is pretty cool because a couple of years ago when you guys did your first session, I got a chance to watch this, right? And then the update last year, and I was all excited about what is the difference between person A and person B. And so it's good to be able to do an update to show what happened to both person A and B over the last couple of years. And so we take we basically considered 150,000 hex for a stake, and they said the first person was going to stake for 1 year, and then restake every year for 15 years. And when they did the restake, they would restake both their principal and interest. And then for person B, we just assumed that they would do a Quattro Cinco and stay staked. And so now we have results that we can show on the screen, as well as a forecast.
Yeah. Exactly. And one more point about person A, we also choose to take this person A because we wanted to compare two persons who are never selling a single hex, you know, that we have really a good comparison. So both persons here are actually like perfect for the system of hex because both persons are never selling any hex. And now we are showing like still the difference between those two players.
Sure, and the folks watching this who know the system already, they know, they're like, oh, you're just showing me what I already knew. But it isn't. It's pretty impressive to see these things on the screen because person A would have started with 10.8 T-shares. By the time they're done in 15 years, they may be as low as 3.6 T-shares that they would actually be earning on, while the Quattro Cinco staker, you know, person B would have started with 27.1 and would have kept that 27.1 throughout the whole time. And this is kind of an argument for, you know, how longer staking runs work. Because once you start, you know, with shorter stakes, if your intent was to somehow grow those into larger T-share holdings, it's not going to happen.
But maybe you don't even need larger T-shares holding because like we see here at person B, it's already enough to just hold on to the T-shares that you have with a long stake, for example. And then the next couple of slides going to be really interesting when we look in the APY. So let's look at the next one.
Yeah, and this is a nice one. This shows the divergence between A and B, person A and B, and how much hex they would have, principal and yield at the end of their stake. You know, and again, this is based on the same model that we were talking about a little bit earlier, as far as the restaking, T-share rate, and all the rest. But you know, person B would have 3 times as much hex at the end of their, you know, at the end of that 15 years. You know, and that's again assuming never sell, right? Always restaking.
And again, yeah, always restaking, never sold a single hex. So that's like a pretty significant
difference.
gap,
And
right,
it also does not account for all the fees that those two people will be earning in the past, right?
Yeah, and that's a good point. I appreciate bringing that up a bit, because our model that we put together for payouts into the future did not include emergency or late stake penalties, because we really don't have a great way to estimate those. And mostly we could have, but I think it was a very good approach at the moment not to do that, because we do expect a lot of volatility as we go into years 5, 6, 7.
And now you could argue, well, person A as well as person B, they're both earning the fees because they are both staked at the whole time. But person B, we have to remember, has way more T-shares than person A, and person A is even losing T-shares over time. And if you have less T-shares, less of the emergency and stake or late penalties are paid to you. This is just what this graphic shows really well. And then in the next slide, here we now talk about the APY. And because we have the daily payout that is rising, we have a really interesting APY chart, which is the next one.
Yeah, it's silly. I was laughing when Patrick and I were talking about this the other day. I don't know what I expected to see, but even if I'm working with all this data on a regular basis, I didn't necessarily expect to see as much of an increase over time of APY for a Quattro Cinco staker. And I think it's pretty important, because you look at person A, and their yield will continue to go down over time in the system. But because the Quattro Cinco staker is out as long as they are at the 15.2 years, what they're able to do is continually increase the APY over time. It might, maybe some other people will feel the same way. It wasn't intuitive to me that would be the case, that the Quattro Cinco staker would see that, but it does make sense. And maybe the difference so much is I didn't necessarily think a short staker would lose as much. Maybe that's really the way to say it.
And Patrick, we have
And
talked about this
yeah,
phenomenon a lot, right? So I want to ask you about your opinion about that.
So, we not necessarily have so much person A's in our hex system, but what we have actually in our hex system is that we have a lot of hex which are staked on a really short time frame, like in a 55-day average, for example. And we're talking about a few billion of hex principal there, and they will lose way more than the yellow line there, because, for example, they are using more or less the hex system for keeping their principal and then like live off this short-term yield. But over time, they will get less and less and less yield with this strategy of just short-term staking. That's why laddering their hex or even putting them as long as you can is way more efficient than compounding or short-term staking.
And this staking simulation, you already know it from the last 2 years. We have done this same simulation. And today we want to introduce a third person for our next staking simulation, because this really shows how important it is to stake early in Hex.
Yeah. And so the third one is person C. So I thought that was a good addition, right? So we have the staking simulation for person C, where they started to stake this year. And so we don't have historic data. And I guess we probably should have highlighted that a little bit further. When we were looking at A and B, we were actually looking in the beginning of that chart is actual data. If they had simulated data for having staked those first 2 years. So we started out person C at 150,000 hex for Quattro Cinco as of this year, the beginning of this year, January 1st, 23. And you'll see that as we get over to it, we'll see what their T-share count looks like. Now unexpectedly, right, the cost per T-share, and I think you did have it on the screen there previously, was about 16,000 hex. Yeah, 16,595 per T-share back in 2020, and so now we're at 25,000. So you have much less T-shares, 10 less. So just those 2 years, of delay, person C only gets 17.7 T-shares versus the 27.1.
And this is a big difference, right? Because the T-shares are what are paying you the hex, and you want to have as many T-shares as possible. So I cannot imagine the person C just not staking for a long time and then probably thinks, well, I better start staking, because this is what I'm seeing here in the chat right now.
Yeah, this is like a 33% lower amount of T-shares. I didn't calculate on a calculator, but it's roughly something in that area. And I think what it underscores repeatedly when we talk about stakers and hex is that a staking ladder makes a lot of sense in terms of trying to ensure that you have availability of hex at some future date, rather than trying to do exceptionally short stakes.
Yes, 100%. And I think this chart also really interesting here. Crispy, what do we see?
Yeah, and this goes right back to that APY chart we were looking at. Now we've added person C, and you can also see that it's not too late for person C to come in, begin to get some really great yield percentage. I mean, it's just a little bit below 30%, but that over time, even today, a Quattro Cinco staker will begin to build their yield over time. And perhaps in 15 years, they'll be closer to 40% or 38% on their specific stake.
Well, this shows that the APY in Hex changes. It is a dynamic system. We see the daily payout rising and rising, the T-share pool going down, and this results in a higher APY over time. And Patrick, now I think we are at a point where we will talk about dynamic system and how it is a self-balancing system that we have in Hex. Maybe we can go into this topic a little bit. How is Hex a self-balancing system, and what happens if more people come in or less people participate?
You were talking about I thought like Crispy will explain that part as well, because he can do that so nicely as a native speaker as well.
Yeah. Well, you'll add your 2 cents, I'm sure. Well, I think when we talk about it being a dynamic system, and again, a lot of what you've already talked about, AAVE, is included in this, right? But the staking behavior that we do, that by operating the contract ourselves, right? The more hex that gets staked, the greater the number of T-shares. The more T-shares that share the payout, so therefore your APY might go down, and the same thing could be the other way around. If we end up with less stakers or less hex staked, you have less T-shares and the APY will go up. And so in that way, it's self-correcting, but at the same time, it's not just about the number of stakers or the number of T-shares staked. You also have that T-share rate. And because the T-share rate is always pushing the system forward, when we're interacting in this way, what it does is it kind of it acts as a great distribution of hex over time, and even yield, if you want to think of it that way. Because even person B who is in there, when they get to the end of their stake, they're no longer protected. All right, they're going to have to restake, and the restake will be at whatever the rates are at that time. And so when you look at all these hundreds and thousands of stakes that are going through every year, I think it's something like 300-400 a day. Maybe it's a little bit more on some days. I mean, all of those are being affected by these forces. And so when we have again, staking behaviors will affect all of us. So how did I do, Patrick?
And then obviously we have
perfect.
the conclusion out of our staking simulation that if you're not staking in Hex, or if you're not staking long-term in Hex, you're losing out on a lot of T-shares, and then this will result in your Hex being diluted by all the other Hex that the other people are earning, right? And this is really one
exactly. Yeah, just think about like just having liquid hex in your wallet. You are getting diluted versus person B by more than 40% per year.
Yeah.
And now I see that we have to wrap it up a little bit, Patrick. Here we see the APY and it is moving. And here in the next chart, we have a explanation why it is moving. Where does the 38% come from that we see so often advertised about Hex?
Yeah, I think that's another good one to talk about. We talk about the 38%, and I know it rubs some people the wrong way, but when we're talking about the 38% or the 36.4 as is today, it's the average APY of all open stakes. It's the average APY of all open stakes. So that's where that's coming from.
And then you see here, if all the hex that is available is staked, then the staked class would only earn 3.69% of yield. And if only 1% is staked, then the APY would be 3.69. And right now I'm seeing here there's the word inflation.
396.
369, right? I'm sorry for this, but I'm seeing here right now the word inflation, and we are using the word yield. And in Hex, this is pretty much the same, because the inflation that is produced by the smart contract is paid out as yield to the staker class. And here you see the newest number that we have for the average staker is 36.4% of yield when you stake for the average staking duration, which is right now, I think 6.5. But anyways, this is also a number that we want to get into, because this is one of Richard Hart's favorite number in the Hex ecosystem. Right now, we see it as 6.52. And here at the end, Patrick, we see a little dip down. What happened there?
So the little dip down was just a recent event where one of the biggest player in Hex staked over 2 billion of Hex for a short amount of time. But I mean, some blockchain analysts say that he just did it because there is like another stake ending on this date, and assuming that it will just be like compounded and then staked out for a longer time frame. But as you can see, so the average staking duration is always determined by the dynamic system of the staker class, and it is increasing if the staker class is putting their hex for more than 6.5 years, and it is decreasing if they're putting it for less than the 6.5 years. The only reason what wasn't like that correct in my saying right now is that it is a weighted average. So it also depends like how much volume, how much hex it is staked for 5555 or like just for a few months.
Really important that you brought that up, Patrick, because it is the reason why Richard Hart loves this number so much. It is a weighted average duration. So we need a lot of 5555 stakes with a lot of volume to get the number at this average staking duration up. And it has been going up the last 3 years. You see that here in the chart really beautifully. The third part of our final segment here is the minted user yield. We have talked about this number in the past couple of years, and you see that the inflation that we have in Hex is actually delayed, because it is only coming out when somebody ends a stake. So we call it delayed yield. In 2021, this minted user yield has been 1.48. And look at this, 2022, we are down at 1.29, because the average staking duration is getting longer and longer. I think this is the main reason why the minted user yield is going down like this, right? And
what I have to say for this is that if the people are still remembering our presentation from last year I don't remember where or how, but we put it in like a little error in this calculation. So thanks to Crispy and Hexfire, we were able to calculate like the real and perfect number for that, because last year we showed like 1.05% of user minted yield of 2021. We had a calculation error in there. It was 1.48, and because of the average weighted duration going up, we have even less user minted yield in 2022 of 1.29%. So the actual minted user yield is way lower than the 3.69% of the total inflation of the Hex smart contract itself.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I remember Richard Hart talking about this number just a couple of weeks ago, and I bet he will be excited to know that for this year, 2022, it's only 1.29. I think this is really bullish for our ecosystem. And now the last part, we want to talk about the key takeaways. And for me, this is really that code is law in Hex, and you have to respect that. You have to make sure you understand all the staking rules and what comes with it, because we have the truth engine. And if you're not honest to the code, if you're telling everybody in the X ecosystem that you're staking for that long, and then you're actually lying, you will be penalized by the truth engine, right? And then another takeaway was our staking simulation, where we saw if somebody is not staking long term, but maybe is just restaking every year, or maybe doesn't even have any stakes at all, you get diluted by the T-share system a lot. And I think this is driving the decentralization of Hex, because we are seeing that 90% of Hex is not being staked and getting diluted. And this is why the staker class is earning such a high yield right now. And then the last takeaway is that T-shares are scarce. I love to say that we have less T-shares than there will ever be Bitcoin in the world. I think that's pretty cool. It's, I think, 10.3 million right now, and there will never be way more than that. So T-shares are scarce. Get them early, get them big. I think this is exactly what you want to do. Are there any key takeaways for you guys that you learned? And now, Crispy, that you were talking about that you're doing those numbers all the time, but this time you were surprised by some of those metrics.
Yeah, I think I was. I think your key takeaways are the ones that I think of. In particular, right, this is an immutable contract on the Ethereum chain, and each of us can go verify this information. May take you a little bit of time depending on the tool set that you have available, but all of us can go to the contract. All of you can push the query global info button. All of you can see the numbers and pull that information. And so I think that's that's kind of a cap on this information as far as code is law. I mean, this isn't us trying to make it up. Yes, we're interpreting maybe what people might do, but the numbers are the numbers.
Numbers are the numbers, and I was so excited to share all those information with you. A scientific approach to financial freedom. I think this is really what we were able to show, that all our assumptions that we did in the past became true, and now we have the data to back it up. And we come here to our last slide, where we are showing our thank you for joining us today. Please feel free to check out KSB TV and hexfire.io. Here you see the social media handles, KSB TV on YouTube, Telegram, Twitter, and Instagram. And the same goes for AAVE_Hex. We are doing a lot to bring the education out in the world about Hex, and we would appreciate if you give us a follow. Thank you, everybody, for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Exactly. So if you want to play around with the numbers even more, then please go ahead and go to hexfire.io. There you can play around and look at several different charts. If you have any recommendation for Crispy Man there, you know, on a new chart, on the metrics you really want to see when it comes to the Hex system, then please go ahead and DM him. He's like pretty open for all these things. He likes to put together those kind of charts a lot. I like it that you made that your full-time job, Crispy. It's awesome to have you in the community. And if you're more interested also in real life events, then please go ahead and check out ksb.tv.
KSB
And then
TV.
thanks to Mehdi to have us on his Hex online conference again. And yes, I hope you enjoyed it.
My pleasure. You guys crushed it again this year. This is the best presentation I've ever seen you guys do, and the best presentation on Hex in general. So thank you so much. Everybody needs to go to ksb.tv. Make sure to show your support by subscribing to these guys and following them across all their social media. So thank you guys so much for explaining the numbers and the quantitative side of how important T-shares are. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mehdi.
Thank you, Maddie.
Thanks, Mehdi.
All right.